The first thing I remember is the silence, not the comfortable silence of deep space, not the quiet hum of starship engines. This was the kind of silence that falls when 80,000 beings suddenly realize they might be watching something impossible. I was standing in the observation gallery of the Grand Arena, my recording drones floating quietly around me, documenting what should have been a routine execution. Below us, under the blazing white lights of the combat pit, a single human stood in the sand. He had no armor, no weapons, no protective field, nothing but torn clothing, bruised skin, and two bare hands. Across the arena floor, the containment gate slowly began to rise. The creature behind it slammed against the reinforced barrier with a force that rattled the entire structure. Even through meters of armored glass, I felt the vibration under my feet. Several Drakari nobles beside me leaned back in their seats, their mandibles clicking with excitement. One of them turned toward me and said, almost casually, watch closely, Archivist. Humans rarely last long against this one. I had studied humans before. Small bones, thin skin, minimal natural weaponry. Compared to most warrior species in the Orion Arm, unimpressive, but they were stubborn creatures. That much was documented. Still, stubbornness meant very little in the Grand Arena. The gate opened fully, and the monster stepped out. The Carnix Thresher, it was enormous. Nearly 4 meters tall at the shoulder, its body was wrapped in layers of jagged bone armor. Each step sank deep into the arena sand, as though gravity itself favored the beast. Its forelimbs ended in curved scythe claws longer than the human's entire arm. Its jaws unfolded in multiple layers, revealing rows of serrated teeth designed not just to kill, but to shred. The creature had once wiped out an entire exploration outpost on Carnix 7. 26 trained soldiers, powered armor, heavy weapons. None of it had mattered. And today, the arena masters had decided to give it a new toy. The human. The crowd began to murmur, enough. Some spectators laughed. Others leaned forward eagerly. The outcome was obvious. The human should have been terrified. Most beings were. I had seen seasoned warriors collapse into panic when faced with a Carnix Thresher. But the human, he did something strange. He cracked his neck, then rolled his shoulders. Like a laborer preparing to lift something heavy, the creature sniffed the air. Its enormous head slowly turned toward the human. For a moment, they simply stared at each other. Predator. And what should have been prey? The Thresher roared. The sound detonated across the arena like an explosion. Several spectators flinched instinctively. The beast lunged forward, tons of muscle and bone charging with terrifying speed. My recorder instantly calculated the outcome. Impact time, 3 seconds. Human survival probability 0.2%. And 2 seconds. The human did not run 1 second. The human moved, but not away. He sprinted toward the creature. A ripple of confused sound spread through the stands. No one attacked a Carnix Thresher head on. No one. At the last possible moment, the human dove sideways. The beast clawed tore through the air where his head had been a fraction of a second earlier. The force of the strike carved a trench in the arena floor. Sand exploded everywhere. The human rolled across the ground and sprang back to his feet before the dust even settled. The Thresher spun around, its massive tail whipping through the air like a living battering ram. It struck the human square in the chest. The impact sounded like a shuttle crash. His body flew across the arena and slammed into the sand 20 meters away. The crowd erupted in laughter. There it was. The end. But then something happened that made the laughter die in everyone's throats. The human moved. Painfully, he pushed himself onto his hand's cup, then stood up. The Thresher froze. So did the crowd. The human wiped blood from his mouth with the back of his hand. Then he looked at the monster again, not with fear, not with panic, but with something far more unsettling. Focus, like a predator studying its opponent. The beast roared again and charged, this time faster, more aggressive. The human ran forward to meet it. Gasps rippled through the stands. The creature swung its claw downward, fast enough to split armored vehicles. The human slid under the strike, so close the blade shaved hair from his head. Before the Thresher could react, the human jumped. not away. Up, he grabbed the creature's forelimb with both hands. The arena exploded with confused shouting because instead of being crushed instantly, the human pulled himself upward, climbed the monster like a living ladder. The thresher shrieked and thrashed violently, trying to throw him off. But the human held on, hand over hand, higher. Higher, until he reached the creature's neck, and then the human began punching the armored beast with his bare hands. The sound echoed across the silent arena, bone against bone. Again, the strike should have done nothing. Every rational calculation said so. Yet the human kept hitting the same exact point between two armor plates, over and over and over. Below me, 80,000 alien spectators leaned forward in stunned disbelief because something had just happened that none of us were prepared for. The Carnix Thresher took a step backward, away from the human. For the first time in recorded arena history, the monster looked uncertain enough, and that was the moment I realized something terrifying. The human wasn't trapped in the arena with the beast. The beast was trapped in the arena with the human. We were the Vorlatha Dominion, a civilization older than many of the stars that burned in the spiral arm of our territory. For nearly 20,000 of our years, we had traveled between worlds, cataloging species, measuring their capabilities, and ranking their place in what we called the ladder of survival. To the Vorlathi, knowledge was power, and classification was sacred. Every civilization we encountered was studied carefully. Their biology, their technology, their psychology, their capacity for war. Enough. Our archivists, like myself, spent lifetimes documenting the patterns of intelligent life. Some species were brilliant engineers, but fragile in combat. Enough. Others were brutal predators who built little beyond weapons. But every species could be understood. Every species had limits. And once we knew those limits, we knew their place. Our cities stretched across entire planets like lattices of silver and light. Towering structures pierced the upper atmosphere, connected by glowing transit bridges where anti-gravity vessels moved in elegant silence. Energy flowed freely from stellar collectors orbiting nearby suns, feeding our laboratories, archives, and starship fleets. We had long ago conquered the need for war among ourselves. Our society valued observation, calculation, and quiet mastery. Others might rule through conquest. The Vorlathi ruled through understanding. When we encountered new species, we rarely interfered. Instead, we watched, we recorded, we learned, and eventually we classified them. Some civilizations earned our respect. The Drakari Imperium, for example, were ferocious warriors whose culture revolved entirely around honor and combat. Their ships were crude compared to ours, but their soldiers were terrifying in battle. The Kalteth were masters of gravity engineering, capable of bending space-time in ways that still fascinated our scientists. The Goran were biologically perfect soldiers, four-armed, heavily armored, and born with reflexes that made them nearly unstoppable in close combat. Each species occupied its rung on the ladder. Each species fit neatly in our understanding of the galaxy. And then we discovered humans. At first, they seemed unimpressive. Their homeworld, Earth, was a chaotic planet by our standards. Violent weather patterns, unstable tectonic plates, unpredictable oceans. A world constantly trying to destroy the life growing upon it. Yet somehow humans had survived there, not just survived. Our first deep scans of their biology confused many of our researchers. They had no claws, no fangs capable of real damage. Their skin could be pierced by almost anything. Their bones were thin and easily broken. Even their senses were mediocre compared to other species. From a biological standpoint, they were among the most physically vulnerable, intelligent beings we had ever encountered. Yet they had built cities, machines, starships. They had reached beyond their atmosphere and begun spreading across nearby systems with surprising speed. Their technology was not elegant like Vorlathi engineering. It was rough, functional, often inefficient, but it worked. Humans seemed to approach every problem with a peculiar mindset. If something did not work the first time, they simply tried again and again. Our analysts initially classified them as a developing industrial species with unusual persistence. But persistence alone did not elevate a civilization on the ladder of survival. When compared to the great powers of the Orion Arm, humanity seems small. Their military technology lagged behind the Drakari war fleets. Their physical strength was inferior to dozens of warrior species. Enough, even their political systems appeared chaotic and fragmented. They argued with one another constantly. They fought wars among themselves. They disagreed loudly, passionately, and endlessly. From the perspective of the Vorlathi Dominion, it seemed remarkable they had achieved spaceflight at all. In our archives, early human assessments carried terms like fragile, volatile, and biologically underdeveloped. Enough, some scholars even debated whether they would survive long enough to become a stable interstellar civilization. Others predicted they would eventually be absorbed by a stronger empire. History had shown that species without natural advantages rarely lasted long once they entered the wider galactic stage. And when the Drakari Imperium began clashing with human colonial forces along the frontier systems, many of us believed we were watching exactly that. The Drakari were ancient predators. Their culture revolved around conquest and strength. To them, war was not tragedy, it was proof of worth. When their fleets pushed into human territory, the outcome seemed inevitable. Human colonies fell, prisoners were taken. Among the Drakari, captured enemies were rarely executed immediately. Instead, they were sent to the arenas. Gladiatorial combat was sacred to Drakari culture. It was both entertainment and ritual, a way to measure the strength of those who dared oppose them. Warriors fought monsters captured from the most lethal worlds in the galaxy. Few survived. None were expected to. And when humans began appearing in those arenas, the results only reinforced our early conclusions. They died quickly, too quickly. Most humans lacked the natural weapons or armored bodies required to survive against the monstrous creatures the Drakari unleashed. In our reports, we described them as courageous but biologically disadvantaged. It seemed a fair summary. They fought bravely, but bravery alone did not change physics, mass, or biology. At least that was what we believed. The Vorlatha Dominion prides itself on accurate classification. We had studied thousands of civilizations across the stars. We had never been wrong before, but there is a danger in studying species from a distance. Data can tell you what something should do. Statistics can predict what something will do. Yet sometimes, very rarely, a single moment shatters every prediction you ever made. For my people, that moment arrived in a Drakari arena, when a lone human soldier stepped into the sand with nothing but his bare hands. And the galaxy learned that perhaps we had misunderstood humanity from the very beginning. Enough. The latter began even before the human entered the arena. It rolled across the massive amphitheater like distant thunder, echoing against the towering stone walls and shimmering energy barriers that enclosed the combat pit. From my position in the Vorlathi observation balcony, the entire arena, 80,000 spectators from dozens of civilizations had gathered that day. Warriors, scholars, merchants, nobles of the Drakari Imperium. All of them leaned forward in their seats, eager for what they believed would be a short and entertaining spectacle. At the center of the arena stood a lone figure, the human. He looked as small. That was the first thought recorded in my notes. Compared to the towering Drakari guards surrounding the arena floor, the human appeared almost fragile. His shoulders were broad by his species standards, but still narrow compared to the armored frames of most galactic warriors. He wore simple prison clothing. Then fabric, already torn and stained from previous encounters. No armor plates, no energy shield, no combat implants. And most importantly, no weapon. A low murmur spread through the stands as the realization set in. This is the challenger, one of the Drakari nobles beside me asked, his mandibles clicking with amusement. Another spectator, a towering Goran mercenary, leaned forward and snorted loudly. It barely qualifies as prey. Laughter rippled outward. The human stood alone in the sand while towering holo displays around the arena lit up with information about the coming match, the creature he would face. The Carnix Thresher. Even among the hardened spectators, the name drew reactions. Some leaned forward with renewed interest. Others shifted slightly in their seats. The Thresher was not a common arena beast. It was reserved for elite gladiators, warriors wearing reinforced exoskeletons or wielding plasma weapons. Creatures from Carnix 7 were infamous throughout the Orion Arm. They were apex predators from a death world where even the smallest organisms possessed lethal defenses. The Thresher itself had nearly wiped out an entire off-world research facility before it was captured. Records show that it had killed trained soldiers equipped with advanced combat gear. And today, it would face a human with nothing but bare hands. The crowd roared with laughter again. One Drakari noble leaned over the balcony rail and called down toward the arena. "Give the Kree a challenge next time." More laughter. Even some of the other archivists around me seemed unimpressed. My assistant drone hovered quietly beside my shoulder as I recorded observations. Sub-displaced is no visible weaponry. I dictated protective equipment, none. Estimated survival probability, negligible. The numbers supported the conclusion. Biologically speaking, humans were not designed for combat against megafauna. Their muscles were strong for endurance, but weak compared to most predator species. Their bones fractured easily under extreme impact. Their skin offered almost no natural protection. Against something like a Carnix Thresher, the fight wasn't even a contest. It was an execution. Below us, the human walked slowly toward the center of the arena. His movements were steady. But I noticed something curious. He was looking around, ill enough, not at the exits, not at the guard, at the arena itself, studying it, the walls, the sand, the distance between the gates. One of the Gorn spectators noticed as well and laughed. "Look at it," he said loudly, trying to understand the battlefield. "That's instinct." Another alien replied mockingly. "Pre-animals do before they run, more louder." The human finally stopped walking. He stood in the middle of the arena and tilted his head slightly upward. For a brief moment, his gaze passed across the balconies where thousands of alien spectators watched him. I wonder if he understood the scale of the situation, if he realized how many beings had gathered simply to watch him die. The Drakari Arena Master stepped forward onto the command platform. His armored body good leaned under the arena lights as he raised one clawed hand. The crowd quieted slightly, though amusement still hung thick in the air. "Spectators of the Imperium," the Arena Master announced, his voice booming through the massive amplifiers. "Today we present a curiosity from the outer colonies." He gestured toward the human, a soldier of the species known as humanity. A scattered chuckles followed. The Arena Master continued, "Our challenger has requested to fight without weapons." The laughter returned immediately. Some spectators slammed their claws or appendages against the railing in delight. A Goran warrior shouted from the stands, "That's because it wouldn't know how to use one." Even I felt a flicker of mild confusion. Humans were known to rely heavily on tools and technology. Without them, their combat effectiveness dropped dramatically. Why would this one willingly discard the only advantage his species possessed? Below us, the human shifted his stance slightly. Enough. He flexed his fingers, rolled his shoulders. The gesture reminded me of a labor preparing for a difficult task rather than a prisoner about to face death. But the spectators didn't notice or didn't care. Their attention was already turning toward the massive containment gate on the far side of the arena. Heavy locking mechanisms began disengaging with a series of thunderous metallic clicks. The sand trembled faintly. That was when the mood in the arena began to change. The laughter softened. Excitement replaced it because everyone knew what was about to emerge. The Carnix Thresher. The gate slowly began to rise. A deep growl echoed from the darkness behind it. Even the most confident spectators leaned forward now. Not because they expected the human to win, but because they wanted a good view when the creature tore him apart. The human didn't run. He didn't beg. He simply stood there in the center of the arena, bare hands at his sides, facing the rising gating, and all around him 80,000 alien spectators watched with amused certainty, because to them the outcome was obvious. A fragile creature with no weapons, no armor, no advanced technology, against one of the most lethal predators in the galaxy. There was no possible way this fight could last more than a few seconds. At least, that was what everyone in the arena believed. The arena gate finished rising with a grinding roar of metal. For a brief moment, nothing came out. Only darkness waited behind the massive barrier. The crowd leaned forward as one. The sand in the arena shifted under a sudden heavy vibration, then something moved. At first, it was only a shape, vast and low, sliding forward through the shadows like a living mountain. The Carnix thresher emerged slowly, and the atmosphere of the arena changed instantly enough. Even those who'd been laughing moments earlier fell quiet. The creature was larger than most had expected, nearly 4 meters tall at the shoulders. Its body stretched long and powerful like a predator designed purely for war. Jagged bone plates covered its back and sides, layered thick enough to turn aside most conventional weapons. Each step pressed deep craters into the sand. Its forelimbs were massive, ending in curved slide like claws that gleamed under the arena lights. The blades were longer than the human's entire forearm, but the most terrifying feature was its head, a wide, armored skull with a split jaw lined by rows of serrated teeth, each one shaped like a hooked dagger designed to tear flesh apart rather than simply bite. The thresher paused just beyond the gate. It lifted its head and inhaled deeply. Even from the observation balcony, I could see the muscles ripple beneath its armored hide. It had smelled the human. A low growl rolled out of its throat. The sound vibrated through the stone structure of the arena like distant thunder. The spectators responded immediately. Excited chatter returned to the stands. Now the real entertainment would begin. The thresher had killed before. Many times, several warriors in the arena had faced it in the past, equipped with energy spears, exoskeleton armor, or plasma rifles. Only 2 had survived, and neither had escaped without permanent injury. Now the creature's enormous eyes fixed on the lone human standing in the sand. The difference between them was almost absurd. The beast weighed thousands of kilograms. The human barely a fraction of that. It was like watching a storm approach a single tree. The thresher lowered its head slightly. Its tail swayed behind it like a massive whip, cutting slow arcs through the air. Instinct, predatory calculation. It was deciding how best to kill the fragile thing in front of it. Above the arena, the Drakari announcer's voice echoed again. That behold the hunter of Carnix 7. The crowd roared with approval. And behold its prey. A spotlight shifted, illuminating the human fully. All eyes turned toward him. I expected panic. Most beings froze when confronted by something so overwhelmingly lethal. But the human did something strange. He took a slow breath, then another. His shoulders rose and fell as if he were calming himself, not terrified, preparing. That alone caught my attention. Beside me, a Drakari noble clicked his mandibles dismissively bright. He muttered, but pointless. Below us, the thresher began to move. The first step shook the sand beneath its weight. The second step was faster. The third became a charge. The creature lunged forward with shocking speed for something so large. The ground thundered beneath its momentum. A wave of excitement exploded through the crowd. This was the moment they had been waiting for. The human should have run. Every survival instinct should have driven him to flee from the charging predator. Instead, he stepped forward. Just one step. The movement was so unexpected that even the thresher seemed momentarily confused. Then the beast roared. A massive forelimb swung outward, claws slicing through the air with lethal precision. The human reacted instantly. He dove to the side, rolling across the sand as the claw carved a deep trench where he had been standing. Grains of sand exploded upward like a miniature storm. Gas rippled through the stands. The thresher turned with startling speed and lashed out again. This time its tail snapped through the air. The impact struck the human square in the torso. His body flew through the arena like a thrown rag doll. The crowd erupted in cheers. Finally, the inevitable had arrived. The human slammed into the ground and skidded across the sand. Dust rose around him in a thick cloud. The thresher advanced slowly now, confident in its victory. Predators often enjoyed the final moments. It approached the motionless figure. Spectators leaned forward eagerly. But the dust shifted, and the human moved. First a hand arm, he pushed himself upward, coughing violently as sand slid from clothing. The cheering faltered. He rose slowly to one knee. then to his feet. Blood ran from a deep cut along his ribs where the tail had struck. Yet he remained standing. The thresher stopped advancing. The creature tilted its massive head slightly, confused. Pre did not usually stand back up after a strike like that. The human wiped blood from his mouth. Then he looked directly at the monster. There was no wild panic in his expression, no frantic attempt to escape. Instead, there was focus, cold, steady focus. The thresher roared again and lunged forward. This time, the human didn't retreat. He ran straight toward the charging creature. The crowd gasped in disbelief. It made no sense. No creature without weapons would willingly close the distance with something like the thresher. The monster swung its claw downward with devastating force. The human dropped low, sliding beneath the strike by mere centimeters. Before the thresher could recover, the human jumped, not away, up. He grabbed the creature's forelimb with both hands. For a heartbeat, the entire arena froze because suddenly the human was no longer running from the monster. He was climbing it. The thresher shrieked in fury and shook its arm violently. But the human hung, pulling himself upward, closer, hand over hand, higher along the massive limb. The crowd's excitement began to shift into something else. Confusion, unease, because the fight was no longer unfolding the way anyone expected. The fragile human was not trying to escape. He was trying to get closer. And for the first time since entering the arena, the carnage thresher hesitated.